Imagine this, no matter where you live, whether it's a cozy cabin in the Himalayas, a tiny hut in the middle of the Sahara, or even a fishing boat in the Pacific Ocean, you're streaming your favorite show in full HD. No buffering. Sounds like a dream, right? Or maybe a pitch for some futuristic tech that's too good to be true. Well, welcome to the world of Starlink, the satellite internet service that's making some bold promises. But here's the thing. It's not all sunshine and fast downloads. Around the globe, we're hearing plenty of praise, but also some serious criticism. So, what's the real deal with Starlink? In this video, we're going to dig deep into it. I'll talk about what Starlink actually is, the fascinating story of how it came to be, and its mission to bring the internet to even the most remote corners of the planet. We'll also ask the big questions. Is it really better than 5G? Is it worth the hype? And what could possibly go wrong with launching thousands of satellites into orbit? Spoiler alert, it might not just be your Wi-Fi that gets tangled up. We'll also explore its environmental impacts, its competitors, and what the future might look like if Starlink succeeds, or if it fails spectacularly. So buckle up, because by the end of this video, you'll know everything there is to know about this ambitious space-age project. Let's get into it. Alright, so what exactly is Starlink? I know it sounds like the name of a sci-fi movie, but it's very much real, and it's not about aliens. Starlink is SpaceX's ambitious satellite internet project, and let me emphasize the word ambitious here. Unlike your regular internet providers that rely on cables running underground, or sometimes under oceans, Starlink skips the ground game entirely. Instead, it uses satellites, and not just a few of them. We're talking thousands of satellites orbiting Earth, all working together to beam the internet down to users. Think of it as Wi-Fi from space. Pretty cool, right? But there's a twist. These aren't your average satellites that just float around aimlessly. They're what scientists call low Earth orbit satellites, or LEOs for short. They orbit way closer to Earth than traditional satellites, about 550 kilometers up. For context, that's closer than your last canceled vacation to the moon. Why LEOs, you ask? Well, it's all about reducing latency, the dreaded lag that turns your online gaming experience into a rage-quit moment. Traditional satellite internet often feels like a game of internet pong, with signals bouncing up and down from space. Starlink's LEO satellites shorten that distance, making things faster and smoother. Now, to make this magic happen, you'll need a Starlink kit. It comes with a dish, a cute little UFO on a stick, as SpaceX likes to call it, and a router. Setting it up is surprisingly easy. Plug it in, point the dish toward the sky, and boom, you're connected. It's like putting up a satellite on your lawn, but without needing an engineering degree. So who's it for? Mainly people in remote or rural areas where traditional internet providers are either too lazy or too broke to lay cables. If you live in the middle of nowhere and can't even load a cat video on YouTube, Starlink might just be your savior. But, and this is a big but, it's not cheap, and we'll get into the cost later. By the way, if you're wondering, no, you can't use it to call aliens yet. Let's just say Elon Musk has enough on his plate without adding extraterrestrial tech support. Okay, so now you know what Starlink is and how it works. But where did this idea come from? Let's rewind the clock and take a look at its history, because the story behind Starlink is just as fascinating as the tech itself. Before we jump into the tech specs and comparisons, let's take a quick detour into the history of Starlink. Don't worry, we'll keep it short and sweet. If you're in a hurry, you can skip ahead to the chapter you're most interested in using the timestamps in the description. But trust me, knowing a little about how Starlink started and why it exists is key to understanding its massive impact. So, let's dive into the story behind this ambitious project. To understand Starlink, we need to travel back in time, not to the dinosaurs. Though Elon Musk probably has a plan for that, too. Let's rewind to 2015, when the idea of Starlink first popped up on SpaceX's radar. At the time, satellite internet was not a new concept. Companies like HughesNet and Viasat were already offering it, but their technology felt like it belonged to the Stone Age. Slow speeds, high latency, and a pricing model that made you question your life choices. Enter Elon Musk. He didn't just want to improve satellite internet, he wanted to reinvent it. Why? Two big reasons. First, he saw a massive untapped market, billions of people who either had no internet or were stuck with dial-up speeds. Second, Musk needed a funding stream for his dream project, colonizing Mars. Yes, Starlink wasn't just about the internet. It was about making humanity a multi-planetary species. The project officially kicked off in 2015 with Musk announcing plans to create a mega constellation of satellites. Now, most people would be happy launching a few dozen satellites, but Musk, he aimed for tens of thousands. Talk about overachieving. Fast forward to 2018, and SpaceX launched 2 test satellites, Tintin A and Tintin B. These weren't just cute names. They were critical experiments to prove the concept, and they worked. A year later, in May 2019, SpaceX launched the first batch of 60 operational Starlink satellites. It was a jaw-dropping moment in space history. The world watched as SpaceX casually tossed 60 satellites into orbit like a cosmic deck of cards. So, why does Starlink exist? I mean, most of us have internet already, right? Sure, it might not be perfect, but do we really need satellites zipping around in space to fix it? Well, Starlink's mission goes beyond just speeding up your TikTok feed or ensuring your Netflix never buffers during a dramatic scene. Let's start with the big picture. Did you know that over 3 billion people around the world still don't have access to reliable internet? That's almost half the planet. And most of these people live in rural or remote areas, places where traditional ISPs don't bother setting up shop because, well, running fiber optic cables across mountains, deserts, or oceans isn't exactly profitable. Enter Starlink. Starlink's mission is simple but bold: to provide high-speed internet to every corner of the Earth, no matter how remote or difficult to reach. Picture a farmer in the Andes, a researcher in Antarctica, or a school in a small village in sub-Saharan Africa, all connected to the internet via Starlink. Sounds like a humanitarian dream, right? But wait, there's more. Starlink isn't just about solving Earth's internet problems. It's also about funding Elon Musk's grand vision, making humanity a multi-planetary species. Yes, you heard that right. The revenue generated from Starlink is expected to fuel SpaceX's Mars colonization plans. In Musk's own words, Starlink is a stepping stone to Mars. So technically, when you subscribe to Starlink, you're not just paying for faster internet, you're also funding future Martian Wi-Fi. Imagine explaining that to your friends. Now, before we hand out medals for saving the world, let's take a step back. Starlink's mission, while noble, is not without its controversies. Critics argue that it's a profit-driven venture disguised as philanthropy. After all, this is still a business, a potentially $30 billion a year business, according to Musk's projections. That's more money than SpaceX makes from launching rockets. And then there's the strategic side. Starlink has already proven its importance in geopolitical scenarios. For instance, it provided crucial internet connectivity in Ukraine during the ongoing war. Whether that's a glimpse of Starlink's humanitarian potential or a peek into its role in global politics is up for debate. At its core, Starlink aims to bridge the digital divide, connecting the unconnected billions. Whether you see it as a tech revolution, a business opportunity, or a geopolitical tool, there's no denying that Starlink's mission is ambitious, impactful, and, let's be honest, a little bit audacious. All right, now that we know the why, it's time to compare Starlink with one of its biggest competitors, 5G. Which one's better? Let's find out. All right, so let's talk about the big face-off. Starlink versus 5G. It's like comparing two superheroes with completely different skill sets. One is a space cowboy delivering internet from the skies, while the other is the urban speedster zipping through densely packed cities. But which one's actually better? Well, it depends on where you are, what you need, and of course your budget. Let's break it down. First up, coverage. If you live in a big city, 5G is amazing. You've probably already seen those ads promising insane download speeds, faster than you can say buffering. But the catch is, 5G coverage is limited. Outside urban areas, it's like a mirage. It looks promising, but disappears the moment you step into the countryside. Starlink, on the other hand, doesn't care where you are. Mountains, deserts, forests. If you've got a clear view of the sky, Starlink can find you. It's like the cool friend who shows up no matter what, even if you're in the middle of nowhere. Now let's talk about speed. 5G can hit speeds of up to 10 gigabits per second. That's fast enough to download an entire movie in a few seconds. Starlink? It's no slouch either, with speeds currently ranging from 50 to 250 Mbps. And Elon Musk promises that it'll get even faster with newer satellites. For everyday activities like streaming, gaming, or video calls, Starlink holds its own. But here's the kicker. Starlink doesn't compete directly with 5G. They're like apples and oranges, or maybe rockets and cell towers. 5G is great in cities where infrastructure exists. Starlink shines where infrastructure doesn't, like remote villages or disaster zones. Latency is another big deal, especially if you're into online gaming or Zoom meetings. 5G wins here with almost no delay. Starlink's latency is higher, but it's still way better than traditional satellite internet. Plus, with new satellite upgrades, the gap is closing. Think of it this way. If 5G is like an express train, Starlink is a reliable SUV that'll take you anywhere, even off-road. Then there's the cost. 5G is generally cheaper, but only if you're in a place where it works. Starlink, on the other hand, requires a hefty upfront investment for the dish and monthly fees. It's like buying a private jet. You wouldn't do it unless you really needed it. So which one should you choose? Well, if you live in a city and want blazing fast speeds for cheap, 5G is your answer. But if you're off the beaten path or need a reliable connection anywhere on Earth, Starlink is your best bet. At the end of the day, Starlink and 5G aren't direct competitors. They're more like partners in a global connectivity mission. One dominates urban areas, the other conquers the wild. Together, they're shaping the future of how we stay connected. Is Starlink really worth all the hype? All right, let's cut to the chase. Is Starlink really worth all the hype? After all, it's not every day that a satellite internet service becomes the talk of the town, or well, the planet. But like any shiny new gadget, Starlink comes with its fair share of pros, cons, and unanswered questions. So, let's break it down. First, the good stuff. For people in remote or rural areas, Starlink is a game changer. Imagine living in a small mountain village where the only thing slower than the internet is the local bus. With Starlink, you can finally stream your favorite shows, work remotely, or even attend online classes, all without pulling your hair out over buffering. And the setup? Surprisingly simple. You get a dish, a router, and a few cables. Point the dish at the sky, plug it in, and voila! Internet from space. No trenching, no waiting months for installation, just plug, play, and surf. Starlink also delivers respectable speeds, fast enough for gaming, video calls, and binge watching. And it works in places where traditional ISPs just won't go. Whether you're a farmer in the outback, a sailor crossing the Atlantic, or a scientist in the Arctic, Starlink has your back. It's basically the Indiana Jones of internet services. But before we pop the champagne, let's talk about the drawbacks. First up, the cost. At $600 for the hardware and $110 a month, Starlink isn't exactly cheap. Sure, it's a lifesaver in remote areas, but if you live in a city with access to fiber or 5G, it's a hard sell. And then there's reliability. Starlink dishes rely on a clear view of the sky, which means heavy rain, snow, or even a tall tree can mess with your connection. So, if you're thinking of getting Starlink for your stormy cabin in the woods, you might want to keep a backup plan. Oh, and let's not forget the squirrels. Yes, there have been reports of squirrels snuggling up to the warmth of Starlink dishes and disrupting connections. So, if you see a squirrel near your dish, it's not there for Wi-Fi. It's probably just cold. Then there's the speed. While Starlink is impressive for satellite internet, it's not as fast or consistent as fiber, and as more people join the Starlink network, there's a risk of congestion slowing things down. It's a bit like being at an all-you-can-eat buffet. Great at first, but crowded later. And let's not ignore the bigger picture. Starlink's thousands of satellites are raising concerns about space debris and light pollution. Astronomers aren't exactly thrilled about their telescopes picking up streaks of Starlink instead of stars. We'll dive deeper into this in the next chapter. So is Starlink worth the hype? The answer depends on who you are and where you live. For those in underserved areas, it's a revolutionary lifeline. For city dwellers with other options, it's probably more of a curiosity. Either way, Starlink is undeniably pushing the boundaries of what's possible in internet technology. Speaking of boundaries, let's talk about Starlink's impact on the environment and why it's raising eyebrows among scientists and space enthusiasts alike. Alright, let's talk about something that isn't as flashy as fast internet or Elon Musk's Mars plans. Starlink's impact on the environment. Because while Starlink might connect the world, it's also sparking some serious concerns closer to the stars. Let's start with light pollution. If you're into stargazing, you might have noticed something strange in the night sky. Bright streaks of light that don't belong to shooting stars or airplanes. Those are Starlink satellites. With thousands of them already in orbit and plans for tens of thousands more, astronomers are worried that Starlink could forever change our view of the cosmos. And it's not just about ruining your Instagram-worthy Milky Way shot. It's about interfering with scientific research. Telescopes picking up satellite streaks instead of distant galaxies? Not ideal. Then there's the issue of space debris. Right now, low Earth orbit is getting busier than a Black Friday sale. Every satellite, including Starlink's, eventually runs the risk of colliding with something else up there, creating debris. And when debris creates more debris, it's called the Kessler syndrome. Basically, a domino effect that could make certain orbits unusable. Imagine a space traffic jam where no one can pass. Not fun. Think of it like this. Earth's orbit is starting to look like my junk drawer. Cluttered, chaotic, and one accidental bump away from disaster. Now, to Starlink's credit, they're trying to address these issues. The satellites are designed to deorbit themselves at the end of their lifespan, burning up harmlessly in the atmosphere. They've also added sunshades to reduce reflectivity, making them less visible from the ground. But critics argue that these steps, while helpful, aren't enough given the sheer number of satellites planned. And let's not forget the environmental cost of the launches themselves. While SpaceX's reusable rockets are more sustainable than traditional ones, they still leave a carbon footprint. So, for a project meant to connect the unconnected, there's a lot of disconnect when it comes to its environmental impact. At the end of the day, Starlink is walking a fine line between progress and preservation. It's an incredible feat of technology, but it comes with consequences, some of which we might not fully understand yet. The question is, how do we balance innovation with responsibility? And that's a conversation we all need to have. So, what does the future hold for Starlink? Well, if you thought what they've done so far is ambitious, you haven't seen anything yet. Starlink isn't just trying to be the best satellite internet provider. It's aiming to reshape how we connect with each other, both on Earth and maybe even on Mars. It's kind of like upgrading your phone, except your new model weighs a few hundred kilograms and orbits the Earth at 28,000 kilometers per hour. Starlink is also expanding its services. They've already launched Starlink for RVs, and there's talk of bringing it to airplanes and cruise ships. So whether you're glamping in the wilderness or flying over the Atlantic, you'll soon be able to stay connected. No more excuses for ghosting your emails, even on vacation. But Starlink isn't the only player in the satellite internet game. Let's talk about the competition. First, there's OneWeb, backed by the UK government and other investors. They're focusing on enterprise users and have already launched hundreds of satellites. Then we have Amazon's Project Kuiper. And yes, Jeff Bezos is getting in on this too. Kuiper plans to launch over 3,000 satellites. And while they're behind Starlink in terms of deployment, Amazon's deep pockets make them a serious contender. Telesat, Viasat, and others are also in the mix, each trying to carve out their own niche in this growing market. So, how does Starlink stack up? Well, its head start and SpaceX's reusable rocket technology give it a massive advantage, but competition is heating up, and that's a good thing for us. More players mean more innovation, better prices, and hopefully solutions to some of the challenges we've talked about, like congestion, environmental concerns, and accessibility. And then there's the wild card Mars. Yep, you heard me right. Elon Musk has hinted that Starlink could play a crucial role in providing internet to Martian colonies. I mean, how else are we supposed to tweet from Mars? Jokes aside, Starlink's future isn't just about Earth. It's about connecting humanity wherever we go, even beyond our own planet. Whether you see Starlink as a revolutionary force or a controversial disruptor, one thing is clear: its story is far from over. The next few years will be crucial in determining whether it becomes the backbone of global connectivity or just another ambitious project with big dreams and bigger challenges. So, that's the story of Starlink. Its technology, its history, its mission, its pros and its cons. It's a tale of innovation, ambition, and a little bit of controversy. Starlink is one of those rare projects that isn't just changing how we access the internet. It's changing how we think about connectivity itself. For millions of people in remote or underserved areas, Starlink is nothing short of a lifeline. It's enabling education, telemedicine, remote work, and even disaster recovery in places that were once cut off from the digital world. And for that, it deserves a lot of credit. But at the same time, we can't ignore the challenges. Light pollution, space debris, and the carbon footprint of rocket launches are real issues that need real solutions. And while Starlink has made strides in addressing these concerns, the scale of its ambitions means the stakes are incredibly high. Then there's the question of fairness. Will Starlink truly connect the unconnected billions, or will its high costs make it another tool for the privileged? These are questions that we'll need to answer as the technology evolves. And let's not forget, the satellite internet space is becoming increasingly competitive. With players like OneWeb, Amazon Kuiper, and others joining the race, the future of global connectivity is looking brighter, but also more complicated. Yet, whether you see Starlink as a visionary leap or a potential problem, one thing is undeniable: it's pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And in doing so, it's sparking debates that will shape the future of technology, the environment, and even our place in the cosmos. So, is Starlink worth the hype? That's for you to decide. Maybe it's the key to a more connected, inclusive world. Or maybe it's a cautionary tale about balancing progress with responsibility. Either way, Starlink is a story still in the making, and we'll all be watching as it unfolds. What do you think? Is Starlink a game changer or a gamble? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the fascinating world of science and technology. Until next time, stay curious and keep looking up.